Hi there, Mrs. Ortega here. I hope you guys are doing well. And today we're going to take a look at vertebrates. So chapter 34, we will take a look at the origin and evolution of vertebrates in this chapter. Okay, so first of all, looking at vertebrate itself, it means vertebrae, which is where it gets its name, is a series of bones that make up the backbone. So most of you are probably already familiar with that, and that's great. That's something you want to keep in mind that we will see with the chordate group. They consist of two small groups of invertebrates and then vertebrates, and so that's what we'll focus on in this chapter. And so taking a look at that phylogenetic tree here, you can see the deuterostome ancestor. Deuterostome is what starts out. But then the development of the notochord happens down here. But before that, the echinoderms diverge, right? And so then you go to the ancestor of chordates. And from there you have two small groups diverge before the development of vertebrae, which is down here. And so we'll take a look at one of these small groups, this one here, so we'll look at. The other one is known for the organism that's in this group is a sea squirt, and so that's just not one we'll take a look at, but if you're interested, the sea squirt's the second group there. And so from there on, we will look at the rest of the groups, which are vertebrates here. So the chordates have four key characteristics that are all shared either during or part of their life. So it could be in the embryonic development or in their adult life. And so those four key characters are listed here, but we'll go through them one at a time, and they are very important, as you'll see here. So taking a look at our first diagram of these key traits, you'll find that the notochord is going to be more interior than the nerve cord. And so the notochord is going to help assist the backbone that develops. And so the nerve cord is going to develop the nervous system. You can see the pharyngeal slits or clefts and post-anal tail. So let's take a look at those and what those mean here. The notochord is a long, flexible rod between the digestive tube or digestive system and the nerve cord. And so this will provide support, skeletal in nature, through most of the chordate. And so for humans, the notochord develops into the spongy disc in between the vertebrae. This is very, very important as it keeps our vertebrae aligned, also just stabilized in communication through the nervous system and the spinal cord. It helps having those squishy discs in between the bones of the vertebrae. The dorsal hollow nerve cord is also very important. It forms from the ectoderm embryo layer by pinching inward or rolling inward. And so this develops into the brain and spinal cord. And so looking at the next one here, pharyngeal slits or clefts has many different developmental functions depending on the chordate. So suspension feeding structures are many invertebrate chordates. So this is going to filter the water for food and for particles needed. Then others, it will be gas exchange like gills. Or for those that have different respiratory structures, it'll develop into parts of the ear, head, neck, mouth region, and that would be for tetrapods that we'll see. So pharyngeal slits or clefts, these are grooves in the pharynx, so that's important there. Then looking at the last one, muscular postanal tail, is pretty self-explanatory, as it will either be developed into a tail for the vertebrate, or it's going to be reduced and have a lack of a tail. But this area contains skeletal elements of vertebrate and muscles. Right. So looking at our first group of the chordates, the lancelet cephalochordata is named for their bright blade-like shape. They're very tiny marine suspension feeders that bury themselves in the sand, and the unique distinguishing features that they retain all four of those characteristics as an adult. And so we won't see that very often, and so, or in any other group really. And so you see that here, the pharyngeal slits, here the tail, the dorsal hollow nerve cord, and the notochord all as an adult. And so the lancelet, it's a small suspension feeder. It likes to bury itself in the sand and will come out and as needed to gather food. And so that's our first organism. But moving onward, we'll have vertebrates. And so those are going to have an elaborate skull. The aquatic forms will have fin rays or fin vertebrae. And then you have vertebrae that enclose the spinal cord, which is also a shared characteristic. And so there are some vertebrates that do not have jaws. And of those jawless vertebrates, only two lineages remain today. Those are the hagfish and the lamprey. So those are the first ones we'll see in terms of organisms. And so looking at vertebrates that have jaws, they're called gnathostomes. And so that's something you'll want to understand. Any jawed vertebrate will be called gnathostome. And so you'll see that portion in just a minute about how that is believed to be developed. But first, the hagfishes. So here you can see a nice example of a hagfish. It has a unique anterior end. As you can see, there are no eyes or ears of some sort, so they use those projections for sensory. Not shown is underside. The ventral side has the mouth, which has many teeth, but it's not hinged by a jaw, and so that's what puts in this group. They have a skull made of cartilage, reduced vertebrae, and a flexible rod that's derived from the notochord that's made of cartilage as well. And so while you can't see their eyes, ears, they are very small formations there. And so overall, if you see this very short, like 3-minute video about these hagfish, I'll comment on this video with the link to it. You'll see their mouth, and it's very large and lots of teeth in there. And so they're known for being bottom-dwelling scavengers, so they'll scavenge for partially dead, dying fish and eat them up. To escape any predators from getting them, they have these really cool slime glands I can see are running across the body of the hagfish here. And it releases a lot of clear, oozy slime. And so the predator gets stuck in the slime and allows the hagfish to get away. And so the hagfish doesn't get stuck in its own slime because it can wrap itself in a knot and slide the slime off of it. Compare that to the lamprey, which is another fish here that is actually a parasite. They're going to clamp this jawless mouth here onto a live fish and suck for food. And so that's going to be very parasitic. It'll leave marks and scars on the fish that are being host to these lampreys. So they also have cartilage segments surrounding the notochord and partly over the nerve cord as well. And they can be found in marine and freshwater habitats. So I also have a very short video, like also 3 minutes. I'll comment with so you can take a look at it. It's really, really cool. Also helps you distinguish between the two if you watch those videos. So taking a look at gnathostomes, so moving on to the ones that will have jaws, they hypothesize that the jaws formed from modification of skeletal rods that helped support gill slits and the pharyngeal slits. And so that's shown here that these two highlighted in green and reddish orange were once skeletal rods that are shown here, and that became modified over time, partially fused with the cranium and became what we know now as jaws. So before I move on too quickly, I do want to highlight the things here you want to study. That one and this one here. Okay. So taking a look at the first of the gnathostomes, we will see these jaw vertebrates are in a large group. First of all, starting with the Chondrichthyans, they are going to have a skeleton composed of cartilage. So this is a more flexible material, and it's not the hard mineralized component of bone. And so the largest of the Chondrichthyans has sharks, rays, and skates. And so if you're wondering what a skate is, it's very similar to a ray, although here you can tell there are a few differences, as well as some behavioral differences, but the ray does have a spike on the tail, whereas the skate does not. That's a kind of main difference you can see there. So looking at this group here, you can tell they have need that cartilage for flexible support while swimming through through the water here. So you can see sharks, a ratfish, and stingray all are in this group. I believe this is a video of a manta ray. Down here. And so some have dorsal and pelvic and pectoral fins, and others do not have all of those fins. They might have some of those fins, but they're all united by that flexible cartilage skeleton. Most of them will also have to stay swimming to have gas exchange occur. So for underwater breathing, essentially, they're going to need to continually swim. But we have some more information about each group here, at least the sharks. So they are very swift swimmers. The largest ones are actually suspension feeders, but most are going to be carnivores, engulfing smaller fish and other marine life. They're known for having a short digestive tract, but really what they're famous for is their acute senses of sight, smell, to detect blood, and the ability to detect electrical fields from nearby animals. So while they may not have all the senses, they do have very elaborate senses in some ways. In terms of fish, We have here that the bony fishes, the bony fishes are in this group called the Oceanthes, but that's not something necessarily you want to remember, and that we'll see ray-finned fishes and lobe-finned fishes. Those are the two groups you want to know. But most fishes will have something called an operculum, which allows for them to have gas exchange occur without continually swimming. So this operculum is a covering for their gills and allow for a continuous movement of water over their gills without them having to swim to get that movement. They also have a unique structure called the swim bladder. It's essentially an air sac that allows for them to control their buoyancy underwater. And then lastly here, they have what we call lateral line system. Sharks have this as well. It's a system that is across their body from head to tail along the left and right sides of the body that will help detect movements and pressure changes in the surrounding water. And so you can see that here in this example of a trout, which is a ray-finned fish, that they have the operculum that's been cut here. So it's a protective covering that allows for the water to continuously move across the gills without them having to swim. Speaking of swimming, the swim bladder is there. That will allow for them to control their buoyancy in the water on their own. And then here, let's see, a lateral line, which in some cases can have a visible line that's running across the fish for sense organs that detect those movements. So those are the three important characteristics of fishes. And so looking at the groups, we have the ray-finned fishes, which are pretty much all the ones you're familiar with will be in this group. And so that's that they have the bony skeleton as their unifying feature, which I believe is on this first slide here. Bony endoskeleton is in the ray-finned fishes. All right. And so they have lots of other things here. You can see in terms of modifications, they have fins, flexible rays are helping with maneuvering, defense, other functions, but they are known for being commercially valuable. And so there are industrial scale fishing operations that have driven many of these fish populations to collapse, but there are countermeasures being taken by other organizations to combat that. And so they're just like any other group, aquatic group, they are affected by different things that affect water flow patterns, so dams, other modifications made by the environment, loss of water, change in pattern. So that affects prey, migration, and spawning. So those are aspects of the ray-finned fishes that most people take a look at. And so here you can see some examples of tuna, red lionfish, common seahorse, fine spotted moray eel. Others are the ones you're familiar with, salmon, cod, tilapia, all those belong in this group. And then the second group of the fishes, the lobe-finned fishes, are defined by their muscular and pelvic pectoral fins. These fins have a lobe-like bone. And so that's where they get their name, or their lobe fins. So they have very thick bones here. And so here in this group, there are 3 lineages that survive. The coelacanths, lungfishes, and tetrapods, which will continue to diversify. And so the example shown here is the coelacanth. This was actually once thought to be extinct, but a living one was caught off the coast of South Africa in 1938. And so any of those people out there that play Animal Crossing, you are familiar with the coelacanth. All right, so taking a look at tetrapods now, they have very specific adaptations that they've obtained in terms of evolutionary history. Now they have 4 limbs and feet with digits, so hands and toes with hands with fingers and feet with toes. They have a neck that allows for the head movement to be separated from the body. They have the fusion of the pelvic girdle to the backbone that helps with stabilizing their feet. And then the absence of gills, and some aquatics, except some aquatic species, have retained their gill feature. And then last thing, they have ears for detecting airborne sounds. So these are things you want to know. Now looking at the first tetrapod, we'll see that they are amphibians. So they are represented about 6,150 species in 3 groups. And so the 3 groups are what you'll want to remember, along with a feature of each group. The salamanders, frogs, and caecilians. The scientific name is not something you need to memorize, just a common name here is good. Okay. All right, so salamanders, they're known for being amphibians with tails. So they have long tails. Some are aquatic, some live on land. But they're also known for some groups, the evolutionary aspect or change in development called paedomorphosis that we saw in the evolutionary chapters. This is where that juvenile has the physical appearance of the adult, but its sexual development is not complete as the physical development accelerated. And so they have the, I'm sorry, too early right now. So flip that. So they have the features of the juvenile. So in the example we had, that axolotl had gills. And so they had the juvenile features, but they were sexually mature. So their sexual reproduction aspect accelerated compared to their normal body development. Sorry about that. So salamanders here are amphibians with tails. That's what you'll want to remember, since we already looked at paedomorphosis. Frogs do not have tails, and they have powerful hind legs for movement on land, and so they're able to jump far distances, which helps with traveling. And so the frogs themselves, the ones that have leathery skin, are called toads. So looking at caecilians would be the last group. They have lost their legs, they're nearly blind, and they look like really large earthworms. And so that is their unifying characteristic you want to know. And so you can see that here, and the caecilian is known for burrowing underground. So they really do resemble large earthworms, but they have features of the moist skin that allows for them, along with the vertebrae, classify them with the amphibians here. So salamander, frog, and caecilian. Right, so amphibians, their word means both ways of life, referring to how they start off as a usually aquatic larva, moving to a terrestrial adult. So they start off in the water and then move to land in their lifespan. And so starting out as a tadpole, they're going to whack their legs. They're going to usually have a tail for swimming. And so they have to develop all those features of legs, lungs, external eardrums. This all occurs during metamorphosis. And so amphibians are also known for having a moist skin that will help with gas exchange, as their lungs are usually small, and so their skin also is a site of gas exchange. And so, sorry, on this here, you'll want to know that too. All right, and so looking at the tadpole, you can see its nice long tail, very thick, round body, not any appendages yet. And then during metamorphosis, it develops the legs, the eyes, the external eardrum. And so then eventually it becomes an adult that can go onto land, but returns to the water to mate and produce eggs. All right, so moving along to the next group, the amniotes. They are tetrapods that have a egg, or what we call amniotic egg. And so here we have reptiles, birds, and mammals are in this group. And they're known for this amniotic egg that contains membranes to protect the embryo. And so I believe that should be something listed here. And so the amniotic egg, we'll see in this next picture, has a few separate membranes that help the embryo. And this was a key adaptation to life on land, moving those embryo offspring onto land instead of being in the water. This was a huge part of that. And so some will have a shell with this egg, but others will have different developmental features, internal features that we'll see. And so here, in the amniotic egg, you have an amniotic cavity with a fluid. This is just protecting the embryo, so you can think like packing peanuts to a box that you're shipping out. It's just going to be there to prevent, absorb any shock and other small features like that. They have the yolk sac. Yolk sac will contain nutrients for the embryo. The chorion will be for gas exchange, essentially, carbon dioxide and oxygen exchange. And then the allantoid is for any waste that the embryo makes. And so those are the four membranes that our book goes over, but in itself is not something necessarily need to know all the functions of. All right, so moving to the first amniotic group is the reptiles. Reptiles include chordates, lizards, snakes, turtles, crocodilians, and birds, with also some extinct groups. So reptiles have scales that can create a waterproof barrier, and most of them will lay shelled eggs on land, as you can see here in that snake image here. Let's see. So here are some examples: a box turtle, Tuatara, a pit viper, thorny devil lizard, and American alligator. So most reptiles are ectothermic, which means they have to absorb heat from the environment to maintain their body temperature or body heat. And so whenever they are too hot, they have to find a shady area away from the warmth. And when they're too cold, they have to find a sunny region to absorb more heat. And so most of the reptiles are going to be ectothermic, but one of them is not, and those are birds. that they are endothermic, that they're going to maintain their own body temperature through metabolism. And so they have to consume a lot of food because that's a huge energy requiring process. Metabolism is going to use a bunch of energy to maintain the body heat. And so for the next group here, turtles, that position in terms of phylogenetic tree still is uncertain, but they're unified by having a shell of upper and lower halves or shields that are fused to their vertebrae, clavicle, and ribs. And so they cannot come out of their shell fully, but they can move their arms, legs, tail, and their head in and out of their shell for protection. The largest ones live in the sea and the marine life, but there are some large tortoises that live on land. And so looking at snakes, they were believed to be evolved from lizards that have lost their legs over time, but they have adaptations to capture and eat their prey, and those are listed here as chemical sensors, heat detecting organs, venom, and jaw bones and elastic skin. So just knowing the groups here. Is important. So the last one here, crocodilians, made up of alligators and crocodiles. They are restricted to the warm regions. We find them here in the United States, in the southern states, anywhere from, I would say, south of Texas to Florida. Alligators and crocodiles roam those warm, swampy regions. And then moving along to birds, which is classified as a reptile here. But everything about their anatomy has undergone changes or modifications to allow them to fly. And so they're very much its own little world in that it has all these different features that are not shared with the rest of the group of reptilians here. And so instead of scales, they have feathers. These feathers are made up of the protein keratin that allow for them to fly. They have a lot of adaptations to maintain a small body weight. And so that is, one of them is the lack of a urinary bladder. So they don't retain or hold any of their urinary waste. It immediately gets excreted once it's made. Females only have one ovary. They have very small gonads and no teeth. Another thing that they have here is very acute vision and fine muscle control to maneuver and fly well. So flight enhances the abilities of them to hunt, scavenge, escape from predators, and migrate. And so here you can see some other modifications that they've made for flight. Their skeleton is spongy, and that is partially hollow, and that is to make their body weight less. And so it allows them to be lighter, enabling flight easier. And you can see how their feathers, their keratin feathers, are made up of a hollow shaft, barbs, and hooks to maintain their the veins. You can see here the veins are the little pieces that come off the shaft of the feather and maintain them in place. Now, a bigger picture of that. Moving to mammals is our next group. And they have more than 5,300 species. So what unites mammals is that they have mammary glands that make milk and hair, and they're all endothermic, usually a larger brain, and usually differentiated teeth. And so teeth that are made for tearing apart rough material like meat or plant material, which is more of a grinding motion. And so the two most important ones are the milk and the hair. And so in mammals, there are three groups: the monotremes. This is the egg-laying group that consists of the echidnas and the platypus. And so here you can see the echidna with its egg. That mammal there will then stay with the mother, and usually I believe in this group the mother secretes milk through their skin, and so they will have to stick close to the mother's body and get that milk, usually from the ventral side, the belly side of their body. Marsupials will be the second group. They have a pouch. So this maternal pouch called the marsupium is where it gets its name, and that's where the embryo will complete its development. And so it has an early birth and then completing development in the pouch. And so there's similarity between the marsupials and the next group is due to convergent evolution, where they have similar environments that have similar needs. And so they match those needs similarly, but they don't have evolutionary, directly, closely shared history. And so the marsupials, it can include possums, kangaroos, and koalas. And so some Australian marsupials are shown here: possum and greater bilby. And so looking at some convergent evolution similarities, here's a diagram of marsupial mammals, comparing them to the next group, the eutherian mammals, and how they look very similar. I believe we saw the mole example before, and other popular examples, the sugar glider and flying squirrel, also shown here. But the next group, the eutherian mammals, have the most amount of species in it. And so here they have a complex placenta where they complete their development inside the mother. And so this is within a uterus joined to the mother by the placenta. And so there are conflicting dates on the diversification of eutherians, but we'll stick to just their unifying feature here. And so the next images, you can see the monotremes, the marsupials, main characteristics, which these are good to study from here in terms of main characteristics. And then the rest of them are going to be eutherian mammals. And so here you can see lots of different kinds. And so this is not something you need to try to memorize. That would just be cruel and unusual punishment. But it's nice to take a look at and see how many different orders and examples there are. All right, looking at our primates, so that is our next group. So they include lemurs, tarsiers, monkeys, and apes. They're known for these features here, which I believe should be on your list, of a large brain and short jaw. They have forward-facing eyes, and so instead of being on the sides of their face, is front-facing, and that provides better depth perception. They have a complex social behavior and parental care. And then monkeys and apes, they have a fully opposable thumb. So looking at the three main groups of living primates, you have the lemurs, lorises, and bush babies, of which the lemur is shown here. So they are smaller primates, tree-dwelling. They have, as you can see, all those main features of primates. The tarsier group is, I don't believe that one's actually pictured here. They have very large eyes. and very small body. They are very distinct from the rest of the lemurs, lorises, and bush babies in terms of evidence, like molecular and fossil history. And so they have their own group. And so that brings us then to the last group here, which is the anthropoids, or monkeys and apes. And so those are groups I believe you do want to know. And so looking at the New World monkey, so monkeys are divided into New World and Old World. New World being the America, so North, Central, and South America. Old World being Europe and Asia. And so here looking at New World monkeys, they have a prehensile tail. So this tail is able to grasp onto things like tree branches, whereas the Old World monkey does not have a prehensile tail. It does not, it's not able to move on its own, in its own direction. And so looking at the next thing here, nostrils open to the sides for the New World monkey provide better better breathing or movement of breathing. And so that allows for them to have a higher ability in terms of energy level. They can move throughout branches and so forth easier. And then here, Old World monkey, the nostrils open downwards, which is not favored. So those features, I believe, let me double check here. Yes, those features are things you want to know. And so looking at the other subgroup of the anthropoids, so monkeys and apes, will be apes. This group includes several select species, or includes a lot of species, but there are some highlighted species that we'll see here that include gibbons, orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, and humans. And so this diverged about 25 to 30 million years ago. And so looking at the examples here, gibbons are known for being very small. Again, all apes do not have a tail, so tailless species that lives in trees is very well adapted to living in trees. And they're found in Southeast Asia. And so they are a very unique group. The orangutans are found in Borneo and Sumatra, and they are very a gathering group of apes that they like to be social with each other, but with others not so much, very reserved species. And compare that to the gorilla here, which is also very social within their own species. They live in groups, but they're very, very large, the largest ape found in many regions. Then the bonobos here are very close in both behavior and nature to the chimpanzees, very social, interactive group. And then chimpanzees are known for being very closely related to humans, and that they are very social, interactive, very capable of learning. So very intellectual in terms of ape diversification, very intellectual group. And so not shown here is also humans. Humans are grouped with the apes. And so that's where we come to now. Humans are mammals that have a large brain and bipedal locomotion. And so the species Homo sapien is about 200,000 years old, which is young considering the life on Earth is as old as 3.5 billion years. But there are a lot of characters that distinguish humans from other apes. We have bipedal locomotion, which gives us an upright posture. So instead of being on 4 legs, we're on 2. We have larger brains capable of lots of different things: language, thought, expression, manufacture and use of tools. We do have reduced jaw bones and jaw muscles compared to other apes, and we have a shorter digestive tract. And so human and chimpanzee genomes are about 99% identical, but due to changes in the regulation of these genes, turning off, turning on, differences in developmental timing or rate have huge effects, and so give us different appearances. And so here, the upright posture and a larger brain, those are the two kind of main identifiers for humans that we'll focus on. So studying of human origins is known as paleoanthropology. So paleo coming from fossil, anthro-human, pology, study of human origins. Hominins is referred to anything in terms of species that's more closely related to the Homo sapien than to the chimpanzee. And so there are about 20 species of extinct hominins that are shown here. So it's obviously not the human species in terms of Homo sapien, but it can get close to in terms of somewhere between chimpanzee and Homo sapien. And so the one you might be familiar with is the one that's here, the Neanderthals. They are now extinct, but they lived in Europe in the East about 350,000 to 28,000 years ago. They're known for having a very large skeleton, much larger than humans, larger brain as well. And so they hunted large animals in that region. They buried their dead, from what we can tell. And so there was a gene flow, if you remember, movement of genes between the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. And so now some people from that area, the origins in Europe and Asia, have up to 3% Neanderthal genome. And so that not only proves that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens were both in existence at the same time, but also that they are able to mate and produce viable offspring. So that's very cool. So for Homo sapiens species, they appeared in Africa about 195 years ago, according to fossil evidence and remains, and that all living humans descended from these African ancestors. And so as we wrap up this chapter here, which hopefully gone through quickly for you, and that really understanding the groups, minus the chordate group here, just ignore them. And so looking at these, understanding their groups and their main characteristics that define them. And so these pages are great and looking at for those as well. So I hope that helps help you understand this chapter more, and that origin and evolution of vertebrates is a large diversification that occurred. But until next time, bye-bye for now.